always a story to tell about Mexican American experiences that can lend themselves to interpretation in history. Whether it's relating to an event that becomes a historic event, whether it's about family history, or whether it's about something that you witness that will become historic. There's always an interpretation and a story that one can build from that event that you can write about, that will become part of an article, or maybe something in a book, a chapter in a book. It's a matter of interpreting events. It's like who, what, where, when, why. Journalists always follow the 5 W's in their little stories right away. Who are we talking about? What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? And why is it important? The same thing with historians, those 5 W's. You talk about people, places, things, and events. And you put them into a perspective. You write and interpret your own interpretation based on documentation if you can find it. So there's always something to write about. Whether you learned it long ago from a story based on what your parents told you that drives your curiosity, which is what happened to me. Growing up in my little mining town of Globe, and my parents growing up in Miami, hearing from them and their friends and people their ages and from that generation, their stories and experiences of racism, segregated schools, neighborhoods, or maybe even success stories like basketball teams winning state championships. What happened? You hear these things when you're growing up. For me, they were just not just stories, but things I wanted to learn about because everybody talks about these things. If I heard these stories when I was little, I was still hearing them when I was a high school student. I was still hearing these same stories as a college student and then later. And I'm thinking, what is it with these stories that just perpetuate themselves over and over again with different generations of people? And I wanted to learn about them. So it's my job to learn about them, to write about them, and to interpret them, and to make them part of the history of the experience of Mexicanos in Globe or Miami. So there's always something to learn, always something to write about, something new ahead that you can probably anticipate that will become historic. People, places, things, and events. Doesn't even matter if it's about a Chicano event or a Latino event, it's an event. So there's always something to write about, always something to study, and connect culture to history, connect the past to the present to the future. But it's the historians who have to interpret if they choose to interpret. It is an interpretation that someone else can read and reinterpret. Or as they say, revisionist historians can always interpret and reinterpret. And that's just what history is, someone's interpretation.